Alright, so to continue our discussion over conditional statements or if statements in Java, we're going to go over a new utility that we'll be using called the scanner, which will allow us to get input from the user who is running the program that we've created. So in this case, all we have to do is add this line called import java.util.scanner that is above the public class of whatever class name we've got. And then inside of our main method, within the curly braces, we're going to have three variables to hold the numbers that we're going to obtain from the user. And then here's a line that you guys have not seen yet. This is just initiating our scanner or our method for obtaining the numbers from the users. And then up here, what's going to happen is that we're going to ask the user to enter a number, and then that number will be put as the value as num1, and then we'll do the same thing for num2 and num3. Again, all of this line of code over here, of course your class here may be different. It could be lab1, lab2, example1, etc. But this right here is what we're adding, as well as this line up here. As soon as we have that, we've created a way for us to obtain input from the user. So now that we have three numbers, what we're going to do is we're going to decide which of them is the minimum, and we're going to print it out. Print out min. And so if the user is inputting these numbers when they run the program, we have no way of guessing what those numbers are, so we cannot automatically pick one of the variables to just print out. So we can't just go print if we did just this, of course it's not, no, it wouldn't be correct. So for example, if I entered the number 50, then 20, and then 1, we know that the minimum is not 50, so that's not going to work. And num is, so here what I'm doing is I'm printing out a message in the quotes, and then I'm printing out the number at the same time. So again, what we got to do is we got to figure out which of those numbers is the minimum of the three. And so we're going to use our conditional statements. And this time around, we're going to look at nested if statement. So nested, it just means that we have an if statement inside another if statement. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to compare the first two numbers. And then from there, we decide which one is smaller, right? And then we take the smaller of the two. And then what we do is we compare that to the third number. So we're going to go if num1 is less than num2, then we'll do something, right? So inside here we know that num1 is less than num2. So now that we know that num1 is the smaller of the two, we're going to compare it again with num3. And if that is true, if num1 is also less than num3, then so far what happened is that we compared it to num2, we know it's smaller than num2, and we know that num1 is also smaller than num3, therefore we're going to print out that, num1 is the smallest. However, if that's not true, then what do we do, right? Well, let's see. If we know that num1 is smaller than num2, then we just need to check that, and if num3 is smaller than num1, then we know that num3 must be smaller than 2, because we know that num1 is already smaller than 2, so we know that num3 is smaller than num1. We're going to say that the minimum is num3. So here, again, we have an if and else statement inside of an if statement, and we are using our brackets or curly braces here to help us organize our thoughts and our code. And then here we're going to go else. So again, this is only going to run if num1 is less than num2. However, if num1 is not less than num2, we have to do something different. So that means that num2 is smaller than num1. What we need to do here is compare num2 to num3. Alright, so we're going to go, alright, if num2 is less than num3, then it must be the smallest, or the minimum. So num2, remember, make sure you're changing the proper numbers here to reflect which one is the minimum based on conditions and, you know, how we're tracking the conditions and how we're preventing code from running if a condition is not true. Alright, so then the else by default will be if num3 is actually less than num2, thereby making it actually the smallest of the three numbers. So if we run this, again, what's going to happen first is that it's going to ask for three numbers, because we wrote the program that way. Right here, ask user for first number, ask for second number, etc., etc. So we're just going to press F5 here. You can see we have a blinking cursor, so it's waiting for me to enter a number. Let's just say it's going to be -1. The second number will be 0, and then I have a -5. We know that the smallest of the three is the third number, so let's see if our logic works. So here we've got a -5. Again, we'll run it again with a different combination. This time around, the minimum is going to be first. And as you can see, it still found it. So now let's make the minimum be at the center. And the minimum again is now -1, which reflects our new data set. So there you have it. This is an example of using nested if statements. And what we did was we found the minimum of three numbers. The other thing that we introduced here is the scanner, which allows us to get input from the user for the program.